G'day guys. So yesterday I was involved in helping to resolve what actually turned out to be quite an interesting problem. So essentially my buddy was out flying and he had his DJI goggles, but he had a really dicky connector type setup going on here, and essentially he had his goggles on and he was walking along and the power kept going on off on his goggles. But something kind of disastrous for his day of flying happened. Not unrepairable, but a bit of a disaster. Is that for whatever reason the on-off cycling happened at some form of interval, and the result is that his goggle firmware basically reset itself completely back to default. Now what that meant is that, his goggles were one of those unfortunate sets which came out being locked to the DJI drone, and the net result is he went from an FPV mode set of goggles on the flying field to an instant reset back to the original firmware, and he is flying with a DJI drone mode. Now, well, I say flying, but he wasn't flying at all, because at that point he couldn't get into the menu to reset the goggles back to the correct mode because the menu option had disappeared. Now that's a bit of a problem. Well, yesterday evening he came past and I plugged it into my system and I upgraded the firmware using the GUI. No joy. And, the menu still wouldn't appear. And in the end, what I ended up doing was binding his goggles up to my DJI drone and running through that way, and magically the menu then reappeared. But, yeah, it's a bit of a curious one. I still don't quite understand the dynamics of it. But what it does tell me is that somewhere within the DJI, it's highly likely that if you have a failed boot of some form multiple times, it will just go to a factory safe mode, which is probably a pseudo bootloader recovery or something. But it does mean you do potentially run the risk of suddenly finding yourself locked out of your goggles. And that's slightly worrying, certainly for the FPV guys. In my case, I got the DJI one, we fixed it, job done. But yeah, interesting problem. I thought I should share that with you, let you guys know the rough findings. I'm a little bit sketchy on it because I don't fully understand all the dynamics as to how it happened. But from what I've described, that will hopefully give some sort of clue, and maybe you can avoid that happening by making sure you don't power cycle this device 100 million times a second or whatever it took for him to do it. But yeah, anyway guys, enjoy your day. Cheers!